The first point, that what is the stage of capitalism that we are passing through? And I will try to trace the history of it a little bit to show that today's capitalism is facing a philosophical crisis. And in the middle of the philosophical crisis, we see challenges coming up from technology. And we are also witnessing a rise of what is called techno-authoritarian state. So there's a decline of republican democracy, and there's a rise of techno-authoritarian state, and relation between capital and state is almost of complete mutual agreement and trust. And in fact, it seems capital is dominating the state at this moment. And in this situation, democracy will become the biggest sufferer. So third thing will be a democracy. What is happening to democracy? What are symptoms of crisis, and how we are facing changes in democratic polity, how the political system is changing, how a party system is changing, how the model of leadership is changing. So these are the 3 points I will be making. Let me begin by suggesting that we are passing through a very, very different phase of capitalism, which is yet to be theorized properly, yet to be recognized properly. And at times people say that we don't even know whether it is capitalism or something else. Maybe the change has already taken place. We are yet to take cognizance of this change. I call it ontic mutation. Ontic mutation means change in a way that it will never come back to the original position. So let me give you a brief idea how things have changed. Remember the rise of capitalism. Two great philosophers, John Locke and Adam Smith. They were the founding fathers of capitalism and the philosophers who gave basic ideas about why capitalism is a good system. And the foundational principles they formed, one was private property based on interest, self-interest of people. Idea was that if everybody is trying to pursue the self-interest, probably it will reach to a common interest. So there is a concept of private interest reaching to common good. So Locke has a theory of property, which goes through various stages of justification, why private property is justified. So why appropriation of nature or resources by private individual is justified. The justification was that it will bring common good. And then Adam Smith developed that further by suggesting that let there be invisible hand of market that will unleash the creativity of human beings. So both of them were very cautious in introducing this idea, as they also suggested that there should be strong restraint. They were aware that if it is left to capital or if it is left to the state, probably the state will not take care of the marginalized people. So Adam Smith, in his other book that is called Moral Sentiments, Theory of Moral Sentiments, talk about that in a big way. Somehow that became a marginalized book, and the main book remained Wealth of Nations. But in the first phase, it was very clear that capitalism was a progressive system. Even Marx appreciated that capitalism progresses. It brings wealth for the people. It really innovates. So that was the first phase. A lot of euphoria that we have innovated a new system of production that can take care of our need, take care of the basic need of entire society. But then there was a problem. There was some crisis. Some people call it crisis. Some people call it creative crisis, that capitalism needed expansion. It needed more market. It needed more labor. It needed more resources. And that was a phase of colonialism. So how do you define colonialism? It was defined by burden to civilize the world, white man's burden to civilize the world. So even colonialism was defined as working towards common good. Of course, we know that it did not work towards common good. It works towards the goods for some people, good for some people, and it was really terrible for other people. But there was a legitimizing philosophy, and common good was at the core of that. Then you find the third phase, that is 1920s, and the major global crisis, economic crisis after World War. And people realized that the accumulation of wealth in some hands and the crisis that was emerging out of that would damage the fundamental principle of common good. So Keynesian economics emerged, suggested that we should introduce welfareism. The common good has to be protected. So the welfare policies emerged. Simultaneously happened something else also with welfareism. The military-industrial complex emerged. As the warfare styles changed, new technology emerged, and the new military-industrial complex emerged in US and in different parts of the first world. And now capitalism has a new phase. Welfareism on the one hand, which was internally quite welfare-oriented, but externally it was exporting arms. So human beings developed instruments of mass destruction, and that was being exported everywhere. So that was the phase when a lot of wealth got accumulated in the first world. And then you have another crisis, major crisis in 1970s. 1970s, something interesting happened. For the first time, these theorists of capitalism like Friedrich Hayek and Milton Friedman, they introduced a new idea. They suggested that the common good is not the material good. Common good is non-material good, that is freedom. So he wrote a book called Capitalism and Freedom. And the idea was that capitalism has to protect freedom. So the material good went out of the discussion. And that was the rise of neoliberal economics, where freedom in the market became the central concern. Now, this came with new kind of philosophy. This came with new kind of ideology. And what is called that it produced not only market economics, but also market society. It introduced market morality. And then finally, 2007, major economic crisis. And that time, a lot of committees were constituted to evaluate the crisis. Stiglitz and Amartya Sen were members of a couple of committees. Those committees read out the reasons for crisis. And most of them argued that the reason for crisis is the greed. Now remember one thing, right from beginning, when the self-interest theory was formed, that human beings are self-interest pursuing beings, greed became part of the organizing principle of capitalism. So greed and common good. So you are greedy, you can produce more, and that surplus production will be used by people for common good, serving the common good. Now, if they are finding that greed was the reason for the crisis, then what is the answer to this crisis? That is where I think there's a philosophical problem. That you are accepting the greed, human greed, as a reason for crisis, but you are not answering how do you overcome that greed in the capitalist system. What instead they did, they abandoned the idea of the common good. There is no debate on the common good this time. Nobody is talking that current crisis of capitalism has not addressed, or now capitalism is no more addressing the idea of the common good, because the ethos has changed. The ethos that emerged with initial stage of capitalism is no more there. It is accepted now that private accumulation of commons is legitimate. So there is no debate on commons. There is no debate on a common good. Now that is a dangerous situation, because once this becomes a common sense that resources are not common to humans, as if you remember Locke's argument when he started with the first principle, that why private property should be allowed. His first argument was that all the resources are available to humanity as a whole. Some people can be given advantage if they produce more. So that was the argument. So that basic argument that nature belongs to everybody, resource belongs to everybody, that was completely abandoned. So this time, the debate, if you look at the nature of debate, it has changed. It has no legitimizing philosophy anymore. Earlier, every time, they retained the idea of the common good in order to legitimize capitalism. This time, this idea of common good is almost abandoned. As a consequence, now, two things are happening. One, capital is becoming absolutely ruthless in appropriation of surplus. And you can see that the question that was raised by Wall Street, Occupy Wall Street movements, that 1% versus 99%, was a very legitimate question. You will find that how this accumulation of wealth on the one hand and poverty on the other is more visible even in the first world. Forget about the second world. First time, I think, in the first world, homelessness is becoming a visibly apparent phenomenon. One can watch homelessness, one can see homelessness on the street very easily. So this kind of accumulation of wealth and no reason, no argument how to make the distribution much more equitable, that is creating a big crisis for capitalism. And this, I think, is a philosophical crisis for capitalism. Capitalism is no more generating any philosophical argument to justify itself. So one consequence will be, of course, that capital will be completely ruthless in accumulating surplus. There is no restraint on them. Second will be that capital will need state, but there will be more protest all around. As the marginal people, they will come up to the streets, protest against this kind of accumulation. The first round we have seen, probably in times to come, there will be many more rounds of this. And to protect the capital, the state will become more authoritarian. Since the state has no other legitimizing argument, the state will become more authoritarian. And the state will adopt a strategy of controlling any kind of political movement. And this time, this control will be supported by technology. Now, in earlier phases of crisis, there was a possibility that this will reverse. Why I'm calling it ontic mutation? There was a possibility that this kind of situation will reverse, as there used to be strong trade union movements. Now the trade union movement has almost declined everywhere. Second, I think there was a dependence of capital on human labor. This time, the dependence of capital on human labor has also gone down due to AI and robotics. there will be massive unemployment and people will be out from the labor process. Take, for example, in Maruti industry in India, for one set of production, they needed around 15 labor and they would produce around 35 cars. And now they need only 5 labor and they would produce around 50 cars. So the production will go up, labor will go down. So massive unemployment could be seen all around. Now this will raise protest. This will be a problem for the economy and the polity. And to protect capital, the state will come in and become much more authoritarian. Another thing that will happen is that the identity politics will rise. There is a possibility that people at the margin, they will be much more dependent on their community affiliations, as the modern state has failed in providing them security, which was being provided by the welfare economics. And the market has failed completely. So therefore, these people will face much more problem, and the protection that they will seek, that will come from the community. As a consequence, there will be rise of identity politics, and that suits the state. So using all these authoritarian states everywhere probably will move towards this kind of policy where one identity group will be privileged over other. So be it in US, where MAGA or whatever it is called, that group is now being protected or being supported, or the support base of that is being used. In India, it will be more of Hindu-Muslim discourse. In Germany, in France, everywhere, I think some kind of right-wing politics will rise. And this is actually fine for the techno-authoritarian state. The techno-authoritarian state can deal with this kind of problem very easily, as it will retain its legitimacy among the majority community. So this democracy will gradually transform into what is called majoritarian democracy. So crisis of capitalism, techno-authoritarian state, and majoritarian democracy. These three are the interrelated phenomena. How do we say that this crisis of capitalism will lead to this kind of situation? How can we say that? Where are the symptoms? Where shall we get the symptoms? I think symptoms are easily seen mostly in literature, not in social science texts. I think literature, if you read all over, suddenly there is a rise of dystopian literature. And one of the great writers, I believe, who is capturing this moment is a French thinker, Michel Houellebecq. Read his book, Atomized. The protagonist of Atomized is a genome scientist, and he is reflecting upon the French society, the elite French society, and commenting on acute alienation in society, to the extent of it that he finally gives up his project. He completes his project, leaves the project on the table, and he absconds. And people say that probably he has gone to become a Buddhist. That was the end of the novel. So this kind of situation where dystopian literature is being produced more and more, and they are becoming very popular. Some of the dystopian writings, which were earlier written and nobody read them at that time. Now they are coming back. In India, in Hindi literature, dystopian literature were very rare. Recently, there's a rise of dystopian literature. One of the novels is called Nakohas, National Commission for Hurt Sentiments. That's the title of the novel, in which there are three friends. They are professors in a university, and they have made some statement, and they are arrested by the police on the ground that they have heard the sentiments. And then the entire novel is about how, through technology, the state is trying to control the production of idea and dissemination of ideas. To the extent of it, that last chapter of the novel suggests that to be an intellectual is a sin, to be a technocrat is the best thing. So this kind of thing is coming up. I think that is one of the symptoms of crisis that we are facing, and the crises are integrated crisis. That's the point I want to make, that the crisis is not isolated crisis. Kind of capital that is emerging, the capitalism that is emerging, which has no legitimacy, which has lost philosophical grounds, the kind of state that is emerging, and kind of democracy that is emerging. So this democracy, is it a democracy or not? I think that is a debate I want to unfold here. I think what is democracy? If you look at the idea of democracy itself, there are four elements of democracy. The first element is that every human being should have access to resources for survival, material resources for survival. Even if there is an inequality, that's not a big deal, but at least everybody should have enough to survive. Now that is becoming a problem due to this kind of accumulation. What is the resolution of the problem being provided? The resolution is that let there be basic minimum income. There's a new idea being floated that people will be given basic minimum income for survival. Now, there are two problems in that. The first problem is that even if we have the basic minimum income, shall we able to access the needed services in a capitalist world where all services are subject to market, where if we don't have enough purchasing power, we will not get those services, be it education or health. Second question in this is, what will happen to our creativity? Labor and work is also related to our creativity. The third major question is that can all the country implement this kind of policy? And that is one of the things that we can feel very easily in India and other third world countries. Let me explain this further. You know, exactly at the time when we thought that physical warfare will be a thing of the past, we witnessed two major wars. And now it seems this war will give a rise of new arms race. And the first world countries are producing arms, and third world countries are mostly consumers of the arms. So a country like India is also now seeing investment in arm production, is trying to invest in the arms production. So it will buy arms, it will invest in arms production. And if it does that, what will happen? They will squeeze money from education and health and invest in arms industry. That is the phase we are going through now. They are withdrawing from health and education, opening these two sectors for the market, opening even the agriculture for the market, and putting all the investment in arms industry. So maybe as in US, industrial military complex emerged, in India also in next 10 years, 20 years or 50 years, we will see another industrial military complex emerging. So we will not have enough surplus to give basic minimum income. So what have we done? We have changed the language. Earlier in India, the welfare policies considered recipients' right to receive welfare schemes. So it was a question of right. Now they are calling it Labharthi. Labharthi is a Hindi word which means beneficiaries. So we are the beneficiaries, those who are receiving any welfare scheme from the state, they are the beneficiaries. There's a change of the language completely. And that change of the language, you can see, has big impact in self-perception of a citizen in the state. One, it will make them feel that they are obliged to the state, that they are getting benefits. And second, that it will only create a small group of people who will be beneficiary. As a consequence, large number of people will be left out. Earlier welfare measures were for the larger masses. Now it will be reduced to a smaller number of people. So this is the consequence in the third world. In the first world, it will be much more alienating. In the third world, it will make life difficult for people. In the first world, probably by arms industry, they will have much more surplus to give basic minimum income. In the third world, I guess we will not have enough surplus to distribute. So we'll squeeze the money from welfare schemes and use it for development sector. This is a new situation that is coming. Similarly, I guess the state is now controlling the imagination. The way state ideological apparatus is working everywhere, and the way new technology of communication is working, probably the imaginative capacity of human beings will also be limited. The AI and social media now will be used by the state power to control human imagination, and also through the ideological state apparatus, that control will be strengthened. We have already witnessed that elections are managed. I don't know about the first world, how much intervention of election managers are there, but I can report from India that in India now there is an intermediary between the leader and or the political party and the people. That intermediary is using data, big data analysis to manipulate the consciousness. So there is a hacking of imagination itself. So entire democracy is limited to electoral process. So the idea that we have to have access to resources, that was my first point, that is no more being debated. The access to resources is being seen as obligation, not as right. That is first crisis of democracy, and that I guess will be almost everywhere, even in the first world, because this trend is emerging everywhere. China, of course, is a very different case. Second thing is the relationship between human beings. I think the way market morality has gone into common sense, and as I said, it has become now a market society from the market morality. So human relations are no more as warm as it used to be earlier. The notion of freedom, what Hayek said, that my freedom is so absolute that even your presence is a threat to my freedom. Since in order to enjoy 90% freedom, I will have to sacrifice my 10% freedom. Therefore, I tolerate you. This kind of argument has become a common sense now. So, not only that, communities are losing trust among themselves, individuals are also losing trust among themselves. So, individual relationships are getting tense gradually. So, distrust is becoming the most important organizing principle of society. In that situation, I think the democratic participation every time creates more problem, as political parties use that distrust among the communities, among the individuals, as a political tool that one can see in different strategies that political parties adopt. What is called in India now a micromanagement. So the micromanagement of politics is about knowing the conflict between communities at a micro level and using that for electoral benefit. Similarly, I think the idea of religion and commitment to religion, culture designed by religion, or culture conditioned by religion, all these things are also being subjected to political manipulation. Political parties are using these techniques to control human mind. Good old Machiavelli, who said that you can use religion to control people. So even that is being used in a most sophisticated way. In democracy, I think democracy is also about a mutual trust and mutual relationship between communities. It is not only multiculturalism, but societies having different cultures, different religions, different languages. What kind of relationship do you build on that? How does the state mitigate these differences? So now what is happening is the state, instead of mitigating these differences, is using these differences. I give you an example from India. Recently, the state has adopted a policy that Hindi language has to be read by children in the entire country. Now, there are states in India where the states were formed on the linguistic issues. The language is a very sensitive issue. So there is a problem now coming up. So north-south divide is happening. So all these ideas, which should have been resolved in the process of building up a nation, which could achieve a non-alienated society, I think now in this phase of capitalism, those differences are being used to divide people so that majority could be created. So majoritarian democracy always play such kind of games where micromanagement of politics is done in order to create new majority or artificial consensus. So this is another field. And then if you look at the way spirituality is being used in today's world. In Indian national movement, spirituality was used for constructing a protest movement. Now there's an entire range of new religious movements in India. Apparently, they look like independent religious movements having different kinds of lessons for everyday life for common people. But if you go deeper into that, you will find that these movements are deeply connected with the majority building exercise. So all parties are having deep link with these movements, and they have their own way of handling that. But people's spiritual affiliations or people's spiritual needs are being subjected to controlling the political imagination. I will give you one example, recent example. The entire world must have watched the Allahabad Kumbh, probably world's largest conglomeration of human beings. Till the last Kumbh, this used to be merely a spiritual space. This time, for the first time, this has become a contested political space. And I'm not sure what advantage it will bring to any political party, but there's a possibility that this will help somebody in constructing a new majority. So some people are arguing that a phenomenon of subaltern spirituality is being used for constructing, for the micromanagement of politics. So democracy, I think, instead of mitigating the differences, is increasing the differences, using the differences. I remember I was doing a field work in one of the constituencies, which was a very sensitive constituency, having almost equal population of two religious communities. People from both religious communities told me that we are secular otherwise, but on the day of election, we become very communal. And every election has impact on inter-community relationship. So now the contemporary democracy, it seems, is facing these kind of challenges. So we are facing economic crisis. We are facing a state which is now becoming techno-authoritarian. I think populism is a softer concept to use for them. I would call them techno-authoritarian state. And we are facing a democracy of this kind, where all possible aspects of human beings are being used for managing the majority. And if democracy means respecting each other, if democracy means trusting each other, if democracy means arriving on consensus, I think all those ideas of democracy are almost dead. Apart from this, if you look at other symptom of decline of democracy, if you look at the nature of the party system, I think the first phase of political parties was party system that was meant by supporters, followers. Second phase of the party system, when parties became internally authoritarian, undemocratic, and externally exclusionary. And second phase, you have a group oligarchy dominant in the party. Now, in the third phase, you will see that parties are, or you can say the second phase was almost like a corporate party, in the sense parties were working as corporate companies. Third phase is very interesting, and I'm just hypothetical here. I feel that probably in the third phase, parties are bought and sold like cricket teams. So the big capital, will invest huge amount of money and buy the entire political party, and make the policies and force the parties to make policies in its favor. Recent front page of Time magazine was very interesting, where Elon Musk was sitting on the chair of the president of America. Now, this is not an isolated phenomenon. I feel that this is something that is emerging in almost all democracies. So, the relation between democracy and capitalism, which started in a very cordial way, and we thought that they will control each other. We thought that probably the economic compulsions will stop leaders from becoming populist. And we thought that democracy will control the rise of monopoly in economy. I think that system or that kind of imagination is failing in a big way. We are probably entering into a new phase where there is a divorce between capital and democracy. In fact, democracy's decline seems to be inevitable in this new phase of capitalism. Whether we want to call it capitalism or not, that will be decided in the next 20 years' time, I guess, once people will start analyzing the feature of this new phase. But definitely, it is not the classical capitalism. The neoclassical capitalism is not any way, by any means, connected to the classical capitalism. The classical capitalism had very strong idea of common good. The neoclassical capital doesn't have that idea anymore. The neoclassical capitalism, I think, has abandoned the idea of common good and abandoned the idea of freedom also now. For last 20, 30 years, the kind of argument that was given that freedom is more important than equality. I think first phase, we had a big debate about equality versus freedom. In the second phase, this debate is no more seen. If you look at the question papers of exams in political science all over the world, in the first phase, this question used to be appear almost everywhere. Economy between equality and liberty, relation between equality and liberty. In the second phase, that question is almost over. And now probably nobody is even debating about freedom. So this is the changing nature of capitalism, changing nature of state, and changing nature of democracy. And the relationship between these three are also changing. So this is a new phase we are entering into. And I'm sure in next 30, 40 years, something more clearly, something will emerge more clearly. The last point I want to make, I don't want to end my discussion, my presentation in a negative, with a negative feeling. I think this is a world when dystopia has become very prevalent. Dystopia is the kind of ruling idea at the moment. But whenever there is a dystopia, there is also search for new utopia. So what is the new utopia we are looking for? What kind of democracy we are looking for now? I think I remember Zizek's one of the discussions where he's saying that we have to now theorize democracy differently. We have to think of democracy, model of democracy differently. What will be that new model of democracy? That is where I am now thinking and trying to look at different kind of movements, different kind of experiments in democracy. Of course, one of the ideas is to have a decentralized democracy. Zizek does not agree with that, but I think decentralization of democracy is needed, and probably the model that Gandhi used to give, a non-party democracy with oceanic circle of organizations, that model is worth exploring. That model probably will articulate the interest of people and rebuild the human relationship, will do the social healing that is needed for survival of democracy. The second point in this new utopia probably could be the Mondragon experiment. That is very interesting experiment of cooperatives. Spain, I think there was a place called Mondragon where there was acute backwardness, and a father from a church went there to establish a church, a priest, and he decided to introduce economic development models because he found that there's so much of poverty and unhappiness among people that it was impossible to create a church there. So he started doing some experiment in production process and created a big cooperative of around 1 lakh people. And during the COVID also, this worked very well. And a lot of people are watching towards this new experiment. Maybe this will be a new mode of production. Important feature in this is that people themselves decide about everything. The income difference between highest salary and lowest salary is very less. And I was just watching some of the videos and reading some of the stuff they have produced. And one question that was coming to my mind is how do they sustain this? I discovered that they have very strong ethics. The ethical system is very strong. I think we have to, if we think of New Utopia, we have to think of very strong ethics. Ethics, which was almost marginalized in modernity, has to come back to our thinking. This is the question that also I asked to a tribal community in India. How did you retain forest despite being dependent on the forest? And one of my students, he wrote a thesis on this, suggesting that there's a very strong tribal ethics of how to use forest, how not to use forest. So I think capitalism, if it has to sustain itself in future, or any other model that has to sustain itself in future, ethics has to be a very strong component of this. Once again, I will go back to Gandhi, who suggested that we must understand everything as it is. So realism is very important, but we should also understand that human beings have an ethical agency. Assertion of that ethical agency is very important too. So probably the new utopia will have both a strong ethical agency and understanding of the changing reality. Similarly, I think the new utopia, if you are imagining, reimagining, how shall we deal with communities and differences among ourselves? The present model of dealing with differences and communities, I call it legal institutional model. That is a right-based argument through which we are dealing with these differences. I think what we need to do is what is called social healing. The dialogue between communities and accepting the problems that happened in the past and for creating a new kind of model of living together. These are the dimensions that we have to work if we think of a new utopia. So let me just summarize by saying that capitalism is in deep crisis. I don't think capital is in crisis. Please remember, this crisis is very different than the previous crisis. Earlier, capital used to be in crisis. Profit making was a problem. This time, profit making is not a problem. Rather, they are making a lot of profit. But capitalism as a system is in crisis as it has no legitimizing philosophy left. Probably capital will sustain itself, but it will produce a lot of problem for people, further problem for people. And the state has become techno-authoritarian, and there's a complete alliance between capital and the state. The political class also probably do not have that much of autonomy vis-a-vis the state. So political class is also, as Marx used to say, the managing committee of the bourgeoisie, mostly. That formulation probably seems to be more appropriate today than in the past. And then we have democracy, which has become majoritarian democracy. It is reduced to elections. It is reduced to election management. Democratic form of society is no more in the vision. And that is the present situation in which we are living. So democracy and capitalism, I don't think at this moment could be considered as compatible unless capitalism changes itself to something else and democracy expands its horizon further. And for that, I think this new utopia that we can think of, probably that will work. And I hope that a lot of philosophers are already working towards that. I can see some of the philosophers who are very much concerned about philosophy of mind. Their central concern is this: that how do we explore the cognitive capacity of human beings, and despite all the problems, we retain that cognitive capacity, which can be what is called in Indian philosophy sthit pragya, where your mind is so stable that you can think of alternative. So despite all this hacking, your mind remains stable. I think that is the point where I would like to end. Thank you very much.
Thank you, Dr. Thakur, for this very insightful talk. Now we open the floor for any further questions. If there are any questions from the participants who are present here, or the online participants as well.
I can move forward.
Yes, it would be nice if
I move there so you can hear me.
you can also.
Can you hear this right now?
Yes.
Okay. First of all, thank you for this talk. It's very interesting. It's definitely the topic of the hour. So for me, some argue that what is happening in terms of the crisis of democracy and capitalism is rather like not unique. It's cyclical. It's inherent to the crisis of capitalism and its ties to the rise of fascism. However, I also think that we are facing something rather unique at the moment, especially because of one, climate change, but two, also, you know, what people are calling that we are transitioning away from capitalism into techno-feudalism. This is particularly Yanis Varoufakis' point. So my question to you would be, what do you think about this? Are we facing a unique challenge at the moment? What role does climate change play? What role does like the specific information technology developments that we're having right now play in this crisis? And thank you.
Should I reply one by one or should I take some more questions?
One by one would be nice.
All right, thank you. Yes, I would agree that this is a very unique condition. There are two prone things. One is, of course, our relation with nature. And it is a very undemocratic relationship that we have established with nature. And that is the industrial revolution ethos, that we have to conquer the nature. The idea that we have to conquer the nature and finally culminating into this kind of situation. So probably that is something that's a larger challenge, much bigger challenge than other things. I think it is related with the nature of capitalism today. As you could see that Mr. Trump has completely abandoned the idea of debating climate change. So probably capital is no more interested in even talking about it. So democratic relationship with nature, how do you appropriate nature? How much do you take, whether it's need or the greed? So I think greed is ruling at the moment, unless, and all these things are connected, I guess. So if we question the greed, we will question the nature of capitalism. And unless we question that, we can't really rethink about the climate change. The challenge that climate change is throwing for humanity as a whole is such a big challenge. But I don't see a major mobilization, global mobilization on this issue, which will really challenge capitalism. That is my problem. I thought that probably at some stage we will be conscious enough to to rally around this point and will challenge capitalism from there. But I think looking at the American politics today, I feel that if people are not conscious of this challenge there, then it is very difficult for people from other countries to connect the issue of climate change with poverty, with economic exploitation and all that. So despite the fact that it is one of the most important issue, I don't think we are really taking that into consideration. I again think that Gandhi probably should be read on this, who argues that nature has enough for need, but not for greed. It's a very classical statement by him. But are we ready to really engage with nature according to need? Remember, even Locke argued in his first principle that we have to take from nature as much we need. We have no right to destroy something which is commons. But that is no more debated. So the modern culture has been designed in a way that it has imbibed the industrial revolution ethos of relation with nature, which is conquering the nature, not living with the nature. So probably that has to be questioned in a bigger way. That is a larger philosophical question, which might emerge with a movement against the contemporary times. And the techno-feudalism, you are right. That's what I call techno-authoritarian state. It will create techno-feudalism. And the communication technology and techno-feudalism are part of the same coin. I think it is through communication technology that techno-feudalism operates, apart from all other things. So communication technology, some people think it is neutral. Feinberg, I was debating with Feinberg, who thinks that there is a possibility of democratizing these things. I think the design is such that possibility of democratizing is very difficult. Unless we make it an arena of struggle, unless we really equip ourselves to enter into that kind of struggle to control this communication technology, it will always work in favor of the capital. And we can see how Facebook and Metaverse and all of them are using the data. We even don't know how the data is being used actually at the moment. And as we know, data is new diamond or gold, whatever they call it. So probably these things will unfold gradually.
Thank you. Are there any more questions?
Yeah, I have a question about, well, I forgot actually, sorry. My question was more generic about the fact that you mentioned that technologies are being used now at a larger scale than before to control the masses, but hasn't this always happened even before technology existed? So, for example, religion was used to control masses and justify colonialism. Monarchs used religion as well to control the masses and, justify their legitimacy. What is different this time? It can be done at a much, much larger scale, of course, but at the same time, it has always existed. And what are we seeing differently happen this time? The second thing is that you mentioned that with more AI and more robotics and the idea of universal basic income, it's not really feasible. I wanted to also ask there that, with each industrial, I don't want to normalize capitalism. I don't like it. It's just like a point of debate that I want to make. So basically, with each industrial revolution, obviously many people lost their jobs, and there's like this whole notion of bullshit jobs. For example, checking out groceries at the supermarket, which could be done by machines, and humans could spend their time doing something more meaningful, something that brings them fulfillment as well. So don't you see there's also an opportunity of an industrial revolution of some sort, which would just create more meaningful jobs, and there will be just like a transfer of different kinds of work that people will do? And regarding the idea of the universal basic income, I mean, in European countries, it already exists to a certain extent. In Germany, all citizens are entitled to children's money. It's called Kindergeld. So all adults, I think until the age of 25 or 26, they receive a very, very little amount. It's not universal basic income for survival yet, but it's, let's say, 200 to 300 euros, something like that. And this is not enough for survival right now, but let's say it reaches like 600 euros or 700 euros. And most of the services that we need here in Europe, they are publicly funded: healthcare, education, transport. So here the idea could actually work, universal basic income. This would be the perfect case study to see it in Europe happening and taking place. Why do you think it cannot take place similarly in India or the global south? I mean, definitely we have governance issues, but also wouldn't it get better with time, and would it not be feasible to imagine it as a possibility?
Thank you. Thank you. Wonderful questions. I think, see, what is difference this time? What is what is different this time in terms of technology? Till now, I think technology was external to human beings. They were instruments, more or less, of mass production or enhancing our capacity to work. This is for the first time in human history. Technology is entering inside the body. The enhancement, I'm not sure if it is still operational, but the chip in the head, connecting with brain directly, negotiating with brain directly, or what is artificial intelligence and probably the quantum computation. These things are fun, or genome editing. These things are very different than the earlier technologies. This new technological revolution will probably change. Sorry. Will probably change human beings themselves. A lot of people are calling it. I remember this novel by Wilbeck, who is genome scientist. The protagonist is genome scientist. Is saying probably in next 50 years or 100 years, new kind of human beings will emerge, who will treat us as left out of the previous era. So this is a new time, there's a new kind of technology that's emerging. One. Second, that probably this technology it will be less dependent on human labor. Now, there could be an advantage of that, as you are suggesting, that this new industrial revolution might give us more time to enjoy our life. It could, provided the surplus produced through this could be distributed properly. I have a very strong feeling that the kind of state that we are having now, a kind of notion of capital which has abandoned the idea of common good, that distribution will not be so easy. And there is a possibility of a mass movement which will probably change the situation. I hope so. That's what is the dystopia, the utopia I'm thinking of. But imagine what is happening. Even the pensions are going. France, a lot of people are protesting against that. Everywhere, social security is being, instead of being enhanced, they are being reduced. So probably the gains of this new industrial revolution, will that be available for people or not? That is something that I'm doubtful about. The third world and first world difference in this will be that in the first world, probably since they will be involved in production of capital goods, the surplus will be more. They can give more money to their people. There could be better social services like Germany or Scandinavian countries. Probably they will do this, though I am told that it is not so easy at the moment. there is a decline even there. I'm not sure. You will tell me better. But I feel that the new kind of jobs that you're talking about, maybe it's possible that that will emerge, but there will be a time lag in that. So the question in the time lag, what will we do in that time lag? How shall we manage in the time lag? The transition that will take place, what will happen in that transition? Are we ready to deal with that transitional crisis? I'm not sure what new kind of things will emerge, how much time people will take in training themselves to deal with the new thing, how much our education system will adapt to that so quickly that it will change everything. I'm not sure about that at the moment. Even if I accept, as you are suggesting rightly, that every industrial revolution has brought new kinds of job and kind of eliminated old kind of jobs, it's possible. But that transition is interesting to see. What will happen to people in the transition? For instance, in US, I think right now, large number of people are removed from the government jobs. I was talking to many of them. They were not even aware that they will be removed. They were given no notices that they will be removed. And now suddenly they are removed from there. So this kind of situation will grow almost in every country, I guess. All jobs in every country are being contractual. And there's a massive insecurity, at least in India, among the young people about their future. I'm surprised that despite economy is doing well, people are not. The average salary of a professor in India is declining every day. So I'm not sure if the universal income will be possible for countries like this, despite the fact that we may produce more surplus. So there will be a struggle for that, maybe. Maybe after some struggle, this enhancement could be done in Germany. If you are getting 200 euros or something you said, how much?
Yeah, I think it's like 200 plus. Does someone know? There's children's money in Germany. 290 euros.
290 euros. So if it is not enough for survival anymore, then will that automatically increase to 600, or there will have to be a movement for that? Will there be a protest for that? Will there be a demand for that? Are people ready to protest for that? Will that protest be accepted? All these questions will come, I think, in every country gradually. Everywhere, despite, if you say income, if you say there is a more surplus in countries, but simultaneously we can also see that almost everywhere the state is withdrawing from welfare schemes, even in European countries. So I'm not very hopeful that this will spontaneously happen. So all 3 points that you made, one, that it's a different technology. I think it's very different technology. We are facing a very new situation as it is penetrating our inner being. Second, that it might bring new kind of job opportunities. It will be very different. Even if I accept that, what will happen in the transition is that remains a big question. And third is that if this kind of minimum income support could be possible in third world or not, even if it is possible in the first world, where I think it is possible to a great extent, because the surplus in capital good production is much more than the consumer good production in which third world is involved. So probably they have more money. Plus, if we start investing in arms race fresh, the money will reduce in our countries. So in that case, I don't think that that is sustainable. What will be done, what is being done right now is that selected people are being given. That selected people become the social base of the political party. The word I use, labharthi. Labharti becomes the base of the political party. And through that, they create a new majority and rest are abandoned. I'm not sure, but I'm told that average lifespan of people is also decreasing despite more surplus we produce. As the access to health system in third world countries, even in the first world, has become a very difficult thing. In US health system, I think is not meant for common people. So maybe Germany has a better health system, Britain has a better healthcare system, but US healthcare system is not meant for that. And gradually, under the neoliberal regime, most of the countries are following the US model. I'm not sure of other countries at the moment, but India definitely is gradually following the American model of healthcare, which is a disastrous model for India.
Thank you, sir. We'll take one more question from our online participants. Will you read that out?
Raja has asked, how do you reconcile the inherent tension between maximizing shareholder profit and maintaining democratic values like equity and social welfare?
Yeah, reconciliation is very difficult. The reconciliation has to be done by the state. Unless the state reconcile that, unless the state, through its instrument of taxation and welfare measures, mediate between the two, nothing will happen. The problem today is that state seems to have abandoned the project of democracy. The state probably is standing against the democracy. The state is standing in favor of capital. So the balance is already tilted. And in order to sustain its social base, political class is using different techniques. One technique is, of course, election management. So a lot of companies are playing an important role in that. And second is that using differences as political issues. So all the differences are being highlighted and then working for creating a majority. So micromanagement of politics to create majority. These are the techniques being used. So I don't see in near future the state changing its strategy. So this reconciliation will be very difficult. Unless there is a pressure from below, unless there's a massive movement all around. The first round of such movement has failed. That is Occupy Wall Street kind of movement all over the world has failed almost. I'm waiting for the second round of movement. And I don't know what will be this new strategy by them as face recognition and other techniques. Through that, they lift the leaders. So possibly there will be leaderless new political movement emerging all over the world. And these are the guesses. I don't have any solid evidence except watching some of the movements in the world where these things are emerging trends. That Black Lives Matter in US was almost a leaderless movement, spontaneous. So I think such spontaneous movements, if they collaborate together or there is a crystallization of such movements, then probably capitalism will also change its face. At the moment, it is not with the human face, I'm sure. So maybe it will emerge, the human face will emerge further, and the common good element will come up again. Why I'm doubting that this might happen, one of the reasons is that we don't have very strong trade union movement anymore anywhere in the world, actually. The trade union movements are divided and very weak. So that assertion of that assertion from below doesn't seem to be in the picture.
Sir, do you have more time for more questions or not?
Yeah, I can take questions if you have.
Thank you.
So there is one question from Irtiza Bojani. What can we do to reduce the influence of big corporations on our political system while still enjoying the benefits of a free market?
I think reclaiming democracy through, that is a strategy we are discussing in India. that creating small organizations all around, small discussion groups, small activist groups, and connecting them together so that you can counter the uh, the the efforts of artificially constructing consensus, so that you can take a very rational decision during the elections. So democracy is a great opportunity to assert. I think the assertion is now declining. So how do you rebuild your civil society so that election management becomes redundant, so that you can pressurize the leadership to respond to your demands? That is important, I think. Unfortunately, this atomization of individuals has become so much that collective action is becoming difficult to handle. So probably we have to discover some new philosophy for collective action and new models of coming together to keep watch on our democratic process and quickly responding to the policies of the state and the political class, so that they are bound to be responsive. We have to win over the state on our own side. And it is possible because democracy, if it functions well, then it could be possible. But that I don't think state is interested in. That there has to be people's initiative. So I'm expecting social movements all around understand this conflict between democracy and capital and come forward to kind of have a network through which it can watch the policies and create pressures on state.
Thank you, sir. Are there any questions here?
Yeah, I have.
Yes, please.
Thank you, Professor, first of all, for this very insightful lecture. My question is in regards to, since when you were discussing the possible neo-utopian frameworks that could possibly emerge, you, for a very brief moment, mentioned about the possibility of the emergence of decentralized democratic systems or something of that sort, which was also discussed by Mahatma Gandhi. Could you please elaborate on that?
Yes, two great thinkers in India, and both were great mass mobilizers also, Gandhi and Jayaprakash Narayan. They discussed this model in a big way. They were very sure that this party democracy will finally culminate into the corporate form. So they thought that there could be non-party democracy. So there can be many layers of representation. So the power should not flow from top to the bottom, but bottom to the top. So you create a small organization, say of 15, 20, 100 people, and then have similar several organizations and get them connected. So some form you can see in India, but I don't think that is what Gandhi was conceiving at the time. What is called Panchayati Raj in India. The Panchayati Raj in India was a model that Gandhi thought of, but that has been appropriated by the neoliberal economy for a very specific purpose, that it has transferred the conflict from the top to the bottom. It has not allowed them to emerge as democratic institutions. In fact, it has in a way emptied out the philosophical power of the local self-government. But if you imagine that smaller groups are formed, and then a next layer of a group where the representatives from the smaller groups come, and then another layer of the group where representatives from this intermediary group comes. So series of such groups, and then culminating into a kind of parliament or whatever you think of. So there will be many safeguards. At the moment, what is happening, that we are electing our representative in a constituency, and the election is for say 10 days. So those 10 days something else happens. we start thinking very differently. And then we select somebody who may not be a great person, and he or she becomes the chief lawmaker now. So instead of that, if there is a democracy from below, then probably that will work further. That will work better. But that is a very, very utopian. It was utopian even at that time. Gandhi wrote in Swaraj that I don't like parliamentary democracy, but at the moment everybody seems to agree with that. So I don't have any way to counter that. But this is a new model that a lot of people are talking. So Zizek is opposed to that. Zizek doesn't think that this can work. But I think that we need to re-examine this kind of model, that probably it will give more sense of participation. It will allow people to represent their interest in a better way. So this is a new model that they have been thinking.
Thank you, sir. Any more questions before we end? All right. I have one small question that you mentioned, one book, Atomized, I think.
Yes.
Are there any other literature, any other books or like other sources that we can use to read on the topic that you basically gave your talk on to further our knowledge about this topic? That would be nice as well. If you could share.
Yeah, I can share an article, a couple of articles that I have wrote. One is called "Is Capitalism Facing a Philosophical Crisis?" and other one is called "The Decline of Republican Democracy and Rise of Techno-Authoritarian State," reading dystopian novels. So you can have a lot of readings in that.
All right, thank you so much. It was a great talk. Some of the participants online, they've also said that it was a really nice talk. I'm not sure if you have read that, but thank you from all of us. Thank you from the Plurals. This is a very new group that we have formed, and we are really, really grateful that you were here for our very first webinar. And it was very, very, very insightful. Thank you very much for your time. Yeah, thank you.
Thank you very much. Thank you. Nice to know that this is the first time you have organized this. There's a new group that you have formed.
Yes,
Tell
sir.
me something about the group. Tell me something about the group.
So in our university, there are many student groups. They're basically led by the students. They're managed by the students for different topics to discuss politics, to have debates, discussions, and everything. But because it's a German university, so most of the groups were already in German. So we found that there was a gap for international and English-speaking students as well to discuss politics, to have discussions on really important issues. So we formed this group to kind of like fill that gap. And this is very first webinar that we hosted. And thank you for being part of that, of course. And yeah, we're called the Plurals because we basically are welcoming everyone from all kinds of backgrounds who are interested in politics and social issues. So yeah.
Oh, wonderful. Thank you. Nice to know this.
Of course.
Thank you very much.
Thank you very much, sir.
Thank you. We can meet again sometime. We can have a good discussion.
That would
All
be
right.
great. Yes.
Thank you. Bye.
Bye-bye. Thank you.
Bye. Thank you.